So this is calculation video 2, and I'm going to talk about the business of calculation. The most famous start for players to have a reflection about how you calculate was a very famous book by Alexander Kotov, who wrote a book called Think Like a Grandmaster, which was very exciting to those of us who weren't grandmasters. Perhaps if I think like this, I'll become a grandmaster. And he gave a lecture about this to some Soviet players. Well, this is after he became a grandmaster, I think. And he asks, and he tells the following story: "Do you know how to analyse variations?" He asked his listeners, and without giving them time to reply, went on, "I'll show you how to analyse variations. If I'm wrong, then stop me. Let's suppose at some point in your game you've got a choice between two moves: Rook D1 or Knight G5. Which should you play? You settle down comfortably in your chair and you start your analysis silently saying to yourself the possible moves. All right, I could play Rook D1, and then he would probably play Bishop B7, or he could take my A pawn, which is now undefended. What then? Do I like the look of the position then?" You go one move further in your analysis and you pull a long face. The Rook move no longer appeals to you. And then you look at the Knight move. What if I go Knight to G5? He can drive it away by H6. I go Knight E4. He captures it with his bishop. I recapture, and then he attacks my queen with his rook. That doesn't look very nice. So the Knight move is no good. Let's have a look at the Rook move again. If he plays Bishop B7, I can reply F3. But then what if he captures my A pawn? What must I play then? No, the Rook move is no good. Go back to the Knight move again. I must check the Knight move again. So Knight G5, H6, Knight E4, Bishop takes E4, Queen takes E4, Rook D4. No good. So I mustn't move the Knight. Try the Rook move again. Rook D1, Queen takes A2. At this point, you glance at the clock. My goodness, already 30 minutes gone on thinking whether to move the Rook or the Knight. If it goes on like this, you'll really be in time trouble. And then suddenly you're struck by the happy idea: why move the Rook or the Knight? What about Bishop to B1? Now, without any more ado, without any analysis at all, you move the bishop, just like that, with hardly any consideration at all. My words were interrupted by applause. The audience laughed, so accurate was my picture of their trials and tribulations. Now, if that story rings a bell with you, and it really did with me, yeah, that might be the book for you. So Kotov says, you analyse drawing up a tree of analysis, and you do it like this. You draw up a list of candidate moves. In that previous example, that would be Rook D1, Knight G5, and a bishop move. So those are your list of candidates. You analyse each in turn, once and once only. Don't dither between them, and then you choose the best move. All right, what could be easier? So that's what he thinks. A bit of discipline. This idea of candidate moves, I think, is really good. So make a list of the moves that you need to think about, and then have a think. And a tree of analysis might look a bit like this. So actually, in his book, he gives a position, and he says this is the analysis. So there's Rook takes Rook takes F6 check. Black recaptures Queen H5 check, and then there are 1, 2, 3, 4 king moves that you need to analyse. And so the king moves to E7, you check it, and then it can escape in 3 directions again, and so on. So there's an analysis there of the different types of vision, and that's a real tree, and so that really can happen. Kotov also describes, which is a little bit more reassuring, not every position's like that. Sometimes you have a kind of a bare trunk. You start off with a forcing move, and you can follow forcing moves all the way down one main line without much of a branch. Neither side gets much of a choice about their best moves, probably because you're delivering checks or something like it to the enemy king. You can have a position where there's a sort of a bare trunk, but with one big branch. So you break through, and then there's maybe the king can run to the queen side, or it runs to the queen side, but they're both fairly main lines as well. You can have what you might call a coppice, which is a group of fairly long straight lines, or this bush where you just have to sit down and analyse each, and there are several branches to each line, and so there are 3 lines that branch, and each branch may branch again, and that's the most complicated case where you do need this sort of discipline, perhaps, that Kotov talks about. So that was a sort of big flag in the ground of this is how to analyse. I mean, when it came out, I think club players like me got quite excited about it. But you ask amongst grandmasters, and they're bit less impressed. They said, so you know, I think I can't remember who the other player was, but I think John Spielman was asked about this at an event, and you know, do you think like a tree? He says, I don't think like a tree. So it doesn't really reflect necessarily how grandmasters analyse. I mean, would they be better if they did? I don't know, but it doesn't seem to reflect the type of analysis that real grandmasters do. I mean, I like the idea of candidate moves. I like the idea of a bit of discipline, but maybe it's if you're going to try and do that. I mean, Kotov clearly did teach himself to analyse this, and was a very strong player. Made the candidates matches in 1953. Made the candidates tournament in 1953 and played one of the most magnificent combinations anyone's ever seen. So anyhow, it worked for him, but it might not work for everybody. So to exercise your calculation ability, try solving positions without moving the pieces, with writing down your solution, and positions that require some minutes thought. That's to say, it's not a sort of a calculation thing, sorry, a tactical thing where, you know, if you think you're going to get, you know, that's the solution and so on. It's not that sort of position. And also positions that you don't get all right. That you're actually at the edge of what you can do, or get towards the edge of what you can do. You can get somewhere, but you don't get it all right. And we'll talk about perhaps spotting and treating some common errors. The first tip, and I think is you know, quite a contradiction really to what Kotov recommends, is think wide before you think deep. And this position, I think, is from Jeff Coakley, but it's a smart idea nonetheless. So if you start thinking about, right, well, we've exposed the black king, and we can have a go at it. So bishop g5 check is very tempting to play. We've sacrificed a piece. Actually, we've sacrificed two pieces to get to this position. But bishop g5 check gets one back at least. Takes the knight may have to come to f6 to get anywhere. We'll take that with check. Takes back with a pawn. Then what can we do? Maybe that's not the right way. Maybe we do we play queen h5 check and then bishop g5? Anyway, you can imagine that you can get quite some way down that line thinking about what happens after bishop g5. But think about your list of candidate moves. What are the important things you need to think about first? What do you need to think about here is your candidate moves. And I always say, look at every check and every capture. Every check that you've got here is queen g5 check, queen h4 check, bishop g5 check, and queen a3 check, which is mate. And so if you do think about all the ideas you need to start off with before going too deeply down any of them, that's a good tip. So make sure your candidate move list is wide, and that you try and make a little stack of all the ideas in the position that you need before you start going too deep. I mean, ideas will occur to you while you're thinking, but you may be able to you analyse better if you've got that stack of ideas to start with. This idea, also this notion that you may come up with an idea that's relevant to a different line, that also rather contradicts Kotov's idea that you think about each line once. So this queen a3 idea may be, when it's mate in this example, but in another example it may be that it doesn't work to start with, but my goodness, it helps you with another line later. So think wide before you think deep. Cecil Purdy, I think, said that, a wise man. Secondly, is always give yourself a choice. Jakob Aagaard is good on this. He says if you're going to analyze a position, if you're going to try and decide what to do, well, actually make it a decision. Give yourself a choice between the two moves. So here's a terrible move by Blacker. Has just been played from knight to c6 to d4. And what can we do about that? Well, I think black was just anticipating putting some pressure on the f3 knight, maybe doubling our pawns. Oh dear, not the double pawns. And was anticipating what actually happened in the game, which was knight takes, knight on d4, bishop takes e2, queen takes e2, and then queen takes d4, and that's about equal. And black should be happy with that. However, what happened in the game should not have happened in the game. What should have happened in the game would be knight takes d4, bishop takes e2, and then white has got a choice between knight takes e2 and queen takes e2. Knight takes e2, of course, saves the knight and wins a piece. So if you do have a choice, actually don't just reply automatically. Give yourself a choice of two moves in case one of them does turn out to be better, and make each decision that you make a genuine decision. Here's an example which I've often used it to illustrate this point. That if you've got a complicated position like this is from a bit of analysis that could have happened in a game of John Nunn's, and this is the sort of thing where the books will write, you get to this position with white to move, and quotes, black has got a winning attack. Oh, really? Again, black's put in a couple of pieces to get to this position. I mean, clearly the king is perilously placed there. Does he have any moves? No moves at all. So if you can make a check without giving him a breathing space, then it's going to be mate. So looks like a position worth having. And white's got a bishop on b5 that's hanging, so that's an important thing. And how do you go about trying to assess a position like this? And Nunn and Griffiths, who wrote about this game in their book Secrets of Grandmaster Play, say just start, just plunge in, just have a go. And again, it may be that you don't need to solve every line all the way to the end. If you have a go at a couple of lines, you may learn a lot about the position quite quickly. So, for example, if the bishop tries to save itself by moving to a4, for example, I think you've got mate in a few, starting with knight c5 check. Knight c5 check. Sorry, not... My apologies. Knight d2 check. So after bishop a4, knight d2 check, king c3, queen e3 check, king to b4, and then a5 mate. So you know white can't save the piece, so you can get at least one piece back whenever you wish, still keeping the king exposed, which is rather nice. If white wants to develop their queen side, perhaps by moving knight to c3, then knight c5 is mate. If they put anything on d2, you can take it with a discovered check, so you'll pick up a piece that way as well, with this bishop on b5 being available. So that's nicely reassuring. And there's and Nunn and Griffiths give some other lines, but I think that's the point of it is that you can get at least a couple of pieces, at least one piece back. You might get another piece back. The king's still exposed. This is probably worth a punt. This is also an example, I fear, of how some of the older chess books have become less useful with respect if they've not been computer checked. I showed this to my machine just before doing this video, even though I did lose track of some of the analysis. And the machine, the dreaded machine, says if you look at this position and show it to a machine, that the machine says knight to d4 equals. So perhaps not a winning attack. The point of knight to d4 being that if the knight moves with some of those discoveries, then knight takes f5 eliminates an attacking piece. So lots of other moves lose, but knight d4 seems to hold, which is a shame. Anyhow, but I think the position still serves to make the point The point being, if you just get stuck in a little bit, you might start to orient yourself in the position, and you might find out a lot about it. After that, you can, all right, well, these two lines do need a bit more depth, and we can go into those in more detail, perhaps using some of the ideas we've seen already. One of the tips for analysis is elimination. If you rule out one of your lines because it's awful, then well, it'll be the other one then. Unfortunately, in this position, White didn't eliminate the one that was awful. The threat the threat Black has got here is to play a check on the E file, rook E1 check, and after the king goes away, you nibble the pawn on F5. So with that as White's threat, then as Black's threat, White needs to do something important about it. Well, the thing that you could do about it is attack the G pawn. If you attack the G pawn from the what might be the most natural move, rook to G8, then Black can play rook E1 check, and then rook back to E7, protecting the G pawn, but you're still going to lose your F pawn. So that one's out of the question. So whatever else you do, I mean, you can play rook A7 without hesitation, because you know that rook G8 is going to lose. In fact, rook G8 was played, so it's a bit of a failure of how to do that. But nonetheless, if you can rule out one of your options, then the other one can be played without hesitation. The point being that obviously that Black's not got an easy defense of their G pawn. Comparison is another way to play. Clearly, we've got two pieces hanging here: the bishop on G4 and the knight on C6. So White can take on. So Black can take on C6. White would take on G4, and we could capture back on G4, perhaps with an extra pawn. Or we can use the bishop as a desperado, perhaps, by playing bishop takes F3, check, knight takes F3, and then captures on C6. Well, so that's your choice. Can you compare them and decide which one's better? Well, after takes on C6, takes on G4, takes on G4, we've got two pieces in play, and we've got an extra pawn. So that's rather nice. After bishop takes F3 check, knight takes F3, king takes C6, then compared to the previous position, we've still got two pieces in play, but White's got at least one piece in play. So on a straight comparison, that's going to be worse. And in fact, in that position, White to move has got knight to E5 check, followed by knight takes F7, forking the rooks. I mean, even if you couldn't analyse that far, I think you didn't need to analyse that far to say king takes C6 is the best first move, because compared to the other line, we keep our massive advantage in development. We've got the only pieces that are developed. White doesn't have any threats. That's got to be the one, even if you miss the fact that there's a check and a fork coming up on F7, which is unfortunately what happened in the game. Some sort of bailout is possible. This is the extraordinary game between Garry Kasparov and Veselin Topalov, where White played, well, if you don't know what he played here, go away and look it up and enjoy the game and come back. But he played here the queen's rook sacrifice, rook takes d4, and harassed the king until the end of the game, and was rightly famed as an extraordinary piece of imaginative attacking play, which it was, and which Kasparov was very good at. However, I think there are several points Kasparov said, well, I had a perpetual. If I couldn't see a way forward, I knew I could bail out and have a perpetual check. And I can remember having a chat with Andy Boyne about a similar sacrifice he played in one of our local tournaments, which I've been unable to find, but was a nice example of the same thing. You can play a sacrifice, but if you've got the perpetual check in hand, it doesn't. You're not actually risking that much. This is similar actually to Kotov's queen sacrifice that he played in '53 in Zurich, where yeah, there were several times when he could repeat the position and gain a bit of time and before committing to going forward. So a bailout will help you commit to a sacrifice. Move orders, very important. So you can have all the ideas, but if once you've got them, try them in different move orders to see what happens. So, for example, we've got 2 pieces attacking f2 for black. We've got 2 pieces defending f2 for white, and it may be that the simple thing here is to play bishop to c5 with the idea of taking on f2. But well, that's only so well and good. What actually happened was with black to move bishop to c5, and rather than defend, white just played knight from d2 to f3, blocking the attack of the rook, and that was the end of that. Really, there was very little way for black to enhance their attack on f2. I mean, bishop c5, not a bad move, but nonetheless, that wasn't as effective as it could be. The most effective way to play this was to take on f2 immediately. Rook takes f2, king can't recapture, and if the queen recaptures, we've got bishop c5, pinning the queen to the king. So if you've got some ideas, try them in different orders. Also, try the most forcing moves. The other thing is, are you being a lawyer or are you being a scientist? A lawyer argues for one side, whereas a scientist tries to find out the truth. And I came across this this example recently from a young man of my acquaintance who saw an idea, wanted to make it work, convinced themselves that it worked, and played it. And the idea was, well, in this position, you've got some sort of tension around the c5 point. I think you can see 2 pieces attacking it, and you've got the c5 move. And if black can be persuaded to take on c5 with the d pawn, then you've got d5 to d6, forking queen and knight. So c5, presumably b takes, knight takes, d takes, and then you can play d6, forking queen and knight, and that works, and that's brilliant. But I think the thing to do, just sit down quietly to yourself and go, let's have a look at that again. So c5, black takes a pawn, white takes a pawn, black takes a piece, d6, queen moves presumably, black takes a piece, and then white takes a piece on e7, and then black takes a pawn. If you add all that up, white's lost a pawn. So although quotes the tactic quotes works, and but you're not trying to convince yourself that it works. You're trying to convince yourself it's the best move. And your best move, I'm pretty sure, in this position is not to find a way to lose a pawn. So, I mean, other moves are available, and I'm sure one of those is better. So don't be a lawyer and argue for a move. Try and find the best move. Don't pick a move and try and prove it's best. Another example of the same thing. I don't know if you want to stop the video and have a little think about this position for a while. This was from Simon Webb's How Do Chess Players Think, where he showed this to a position to a group of English players, different strengths, recorded them for 10 minutes thinking about the position, and said, "Well, what's your verdict?" And I think, well, I mean, complicated position from Soviet Championship, Teschner against Stein. This was from the 1960s, but Webb comments after listening to all these people talk about the position. He said, all the panelists seem to make a judgment about the position instantaneously and spent the rest of the time trying to find evidence to support this judgment. Clearly, it's very difficult to approach chess in a truly objective manner. So much seems to be based on instinct. But I'm sure that's true, but that is something to get away from. Don't decide this position is winning for white and then try and win it. See whether it is winning for white, and don't stop when you think you've found a winning line without checking it. I think probably the answer is, if you did have a look at this, the truth of the position is that yeah, this is we know we've sacked a piece for an attack. The attack is strong, but the attack can only be pursued, but it can be pursued advantageously with a knight sacrifice, either to h5 or f5, and I think both kind of quotes work, but not easy, not easy. Another thing that can get in the way is kind of what you know already, or what you think you know already. I don't know if you want to think about what the best way forward for white is. Actually, it's a forced mate, and I wonder if you can find the quickest and neatest forced mate here for white. If you're slick about this, I'm sure that you will have found the combination known as Philidor's legacy: Queen e6 check, King goes into the corner, otherwise it's mate on f7, Knight f6, so Knight f7 check, check. The King has to come out of the corner to g7 when there's a discovered check. You can play Knight from f7 to h6, double check. King has to go back in the corner. Queen from e6 to g8, check. Rook takes the queen, and then Knight to f7, smothered mate. Very nice, very neat. But not the best line, not the shortest line at least. I mean, can't be better than mate, can it? But if you play the queen check, king in the corner, Knight f7, check, king to king to g8. Actually, just knight takes rook, discovered check, and it's mate next move, which is one move shorter. Now, in this position, it's one move shorter. In another position, it might mean the difference between it working and not working. So, although you think you know what is going on in this position, this is a particular instance of it, and something else might be going on. And I found that quite a provocative position. It's from a psychology experiment by a lad called Cyril Ooma, who was trying to see to what extent existing knowledge of chess players interfered with their successful solution of positions. Interesting. There's some other cases from Simon Webb's analysis where he found that again there was one move in a position where only Grandmaster Jonathan Mestel and the worst player in the room considered a particular example. The Grandmaster because he knew when to break the rules, and the worst player because he didn't know the rules, and everybody else couldn't look at couldn't look at this idea, because that's not sort of move you play in this position. Oh, here it is. So I've forgotten I'd included it. So here we go. The idea of meeting from black to play f5 with g takes f5 and e4 was difficult to spot, because that's not normally what you do. And the ungraded player after f5, g5 was the obvious reply. Another really strong technique, which I've heard attributed to Sham Shankland, but I think it's centuries older than him, is to say, if there's a move that you want to play and it looks like it's not on, well, have another look and see if you can play it anyway. So black has just nibbled a pawn on a2, and the proper punishment for this, of course, is to play b3, trapping the bishop, king b2, and take the bishop. Now that doesn't work in this position, because after b3 the c pawn is pinned, so white can play bishop takes b3. So after b3, black can just take the pawn with the bishop, and you can't take back. So that doesn't work, but it does work. So b3, bishop takes b3, and now knight a5, forking the rook and the bishop. So worth a second look. Even if you think it doesn't work, have a second look and see if you can make it work. Because if that's the move you want to play, that may be a way of finding the right move. But play it anyway. Have a look. Here's another one where you might rule out the best move, or the move that you want to play. I don't know what you want to play in this position. We've got some, shall we say, tension developing on g7. And mate in one move is to pick up the queen on b3 and drop it on g7, checkmate, and to head towards g7 via, how would you go, queen from b3 to g3, and then take on g7 is going to be great. While I've been saying all that, if once I mentioned queen to g3, you should have thrown up your hands in horror and said, "But Dave, Queen G3, we're going to get Knight E2 check, and we're going to lose the Queen." Well, actually, yes, but the glorious thing about this position, in fact, is that uh, Queen G3 check, Knight check takes Queen. This position is so good for White, in fact, that we can still play this. Bishop takes G7 and Rook to H1, and we're either checkmating or winning the Queen, or all three. So, in fact, Queen G3 was played. Another thing is, and I expect you do this already, but trying to make verbal summaries of how far you've got with analysis, just to try and put down a little marker of how far you've got, is very helpful. So Tisdall says, talk to yourself. Not out loud, of course, that's against the rules, and chess players have a shaky enough reputation already, which is a point I like. But there's and he gives an example of this, which is nice, from a player, I can't remember who was playing, but he gives an example of some reported analysis where clearly this internal dialogue of talking to yourself helped this player get unstuck from a particular type of stuckness. And so only after he came up with this question could he come up with a move that wasn't originally amongst his candidate moves. I rather like this example from just seeing it happening in real time, as it were, between the old Master game shown on BBC TV, where Miles and Clark were playing. And after the game, they tried to get them to give an account of what they were thinking during play. So if you'd like to play along, you're White, it's your go. What do you play? Well, Miles' comment before he moved was to say this, which I think is quite a nice opportunity to eavesdrop on a grandmaster. He's got to develop the queen side. If he goes b6, extending bishop b7, I can play queen f3 gaining time. If he plays to d7, I can play queen b3, which would pin his knight on b4 against the pawn on b7. Now some threats along the white diagonal against f7 and e6. Apart from that, I might be threatening to play taking on bishop on g5 takes knight on f6. When he's forced to take with the pawn, since his bishop is needed to defend the other knight. This is after queen b3. So what if I could find a waiting move? What about rook e3? And in some lines, that rook would be very useful on the third rank for an attack on the king side. So rook e3 played. However, hell, I've allowed knight from f6 to d5, and if bishop takes bishop, then knight takes rook, attacking my queen. Oh dear, hell, maybe I can play knight takes knight on d5, and he recaptures with his knight, and then I can play rook to h3, and if he takes my bishop on g5 with his bishop, I can play queen h5, attacking f7 and h7. It might be good enough. Still, it's too late now. We'll see. And Clark, in his response, this seems very aggressive to me. He's going to play his rook to h3 and try to deal knockout on the king side. He's evidently going to show me he's a grandmaster and knock me out straight away. I don't like knight from f6 to d5 because of the attack rook h3 followed by queen h5. I think I'd better develop on the queen side and try to counter attack with rook c8. But I'm very unhappy about this position at the moment. So actually, rook e3 was played and knight d5 wasn't played. And I think if you throw this position at a computer, it will confirm actually that that attack is advantageous to white. So the position is that was still an okay move. But I sort of enjoyed the opportunity to say, sort of eavesdrop on Miles's thoughts there, and indeed on Clark's.